everyone, I'm Gabbi, and welcome to my podcast. So these are some of the reflections aspects of the podcast that I record. If you're new to my YouTube page, you'll see that I've got various playlists on there with my camper van, changing spaces, and the podcasts that I do with other people. But I wanted to share some of the things that I learned in 2025, and some of these ideas may help you, and you may have reflected on similar things. And it's more to do with how life starts to look when you get past 50, some of the things that you might start to consider, and some of the ideas that sit behind that, that can help you if you're also thinking about, how you move forward, what matters to you now. The kids are growing up, or your career's taking a different turn, or you're starting to think even about not working in the industry that you're in. So I wanted to share some of the reflections I've had of 2025 that was an accumulation of things that I started to put in place consciously in 2016, and then again in late 2022. And I won't talk much about what happened between 2016 and 22, apart from what started to activate that thought and how I was moving in this direction. But fundamentally, I wanted to share that on the front of things, my life is I'm a fairly ordinary woman. I grew up in a poor, pretty much working class housing estate in Manchester, fairly decent housing estate, with a single parent and 3 older brothers, but grew up mostly with just one of them. And I left home at 18, and a lot of what I do now in terms of getting out my camper van and traveling around and visiting places and meeting new people was all sparked by the early experiences of just having an innate curiosity about the world and seeing places and having new experiences. And that has changed form in many ways. But as I've talked about on other videos, is sometimes we think about what's our meaning and purpose and what do we want out of life. And so this is about what I learned in 2025, but also as I approached and got past being 50. So I'm an ordinary woman. That means to me that I love reading. I love psychology, philosophy, understanding the human experience. I work with clients one-to-one to help them feel less miserable, less anxious, less stressed, because sometimes it's about feeling less of something and starting to feel happier, healthier, and moving into a lifestyle that works for them better. But it's a journey. It's not, for some people, it's overnight, and for others, it's a journey that takes place in lots of interesting ways. So I'm going to give you some pointers as well as to how you can consider some of these different aspects of what you know about yourself, what you like and love, and what you already do that feels good, and how you can build on that, and also how my reflections may resonate with you. So if they do, it'd be good to hear you. So by the time I'd got to 50, I'd already been working in a career that was driven by an innate desire, really, to help people who were struggling and suffering. And, you know, people from experiences and backgrounds that I resonated with to a degree. And I got into the work because I initially was working at the Samaritans. And that's the real end of the line for a lot of people, where they may ring up, but they feel really desperate and they're depressed and anxious and don't know what to do. So if you're ever in that state, don't stay in that state alone, because you can get support and your life can make a turn. And it's not easy to see that at the time. And I'm going to talk about what we can see and don't see a lot of the time, and why that is important to mention. So when I started getting to around 50, I was already considering, do I want to keep doing the thing that I've been doing for the last by then it was about 20 years. And what did I want now that the kids are grown up? One son was moving out. I think he'd moved out. The other son was going to uni, and I had my car and I was going to visit him and starting to explore the countryside and spending longer and longer at the beach. And I love the coast, the sea. And thinking about my career, my children being older, what did I want to do outside of my job, and build creative aspects to me, really. I also, after a few years, became a grandmother. So my eldest son's got a child. So I see her every few weeks when I'm at home, when I'm not on the road traveling, and really enjoy that time with her. And also, still like reading, like the psychology. I'm into photography, love music, teach yoga and meditation. And these are all different facets. But my conscious awareness of making more room and time for what felt good for me and reducing the things and the energy I was putting into what didn't, or what I was letting drift, because sometimes our jobs or relationships or the things that we do don't give us the same joy anymore. It doesn't mean to say it's wrong and we shouldn't have done it. It's just that we've had that experience and maybe we need to look for something slightly different. So by 2016, I'd already been practicing yoga and meditation. I was doing that because I was stressed and I'd hurt my back and I couldn't go to the gym and do the extreme workouts that I was doing at the time. So I took up something much slower, and initially was falling asleep in the class because I was just burnt out a lot of the time. I was managing multiple projects. I was passionate about it, but I had a type A personality and never stopped. When it came to the time of where it started to affect my sleep and my functioning, then I knew that I needed to start learning how to wind down, get better sleep, do some yoga. And yoga and meditation go hand in hand, especially the type that I started to practice. So I was already starting to explore. I'd already been doing the yoga and I was already curious about how life might unfold, and not just randomly now, how I wanted to start putting things in place consciously, starting to consciously set intentions. So 2025 was a year of reflecting on the things I put into motion at 2016, but I still was working. I'd taken on a new job in 2016, went down to 4 days a week. In 2018, I went down to 3 days a week, and that's what I wanted to do, 3 days a week. Then I took a project, 2020, and my hours increased, but I was overseeing a wellbeing project, had a lot of autonomy over that, but it was still, a stressful project to manage. So at the end of 2022 was where several worlds started to collide, really, and work was intense, relationship I was in was intense, and there wasn't many points in which you could get a breather, but at the same time, I was still getting out and about and exploring and taking my camera and having days out. So it was two extremes in a way. So at the end of 2022, I knew the project was coming to an end, and I was talking to my co-host at the time, was doing podcasts with Danielle, and was really starting to feel that burnout feeling coming over me. And so we talked about that, and I said, okay, I need to take one step. And it was also a time where we could get out and about more. And I contacted festivals and said, hey, I teach yoga meditation, do workshops, work with mental health and well-being. I'd like to do something. And that's where it started. So I started testing out these ideas. I also picked up some one-to-one work again. I stopped running services. I took some time out for a few months, just spent some time on the road, and I was just utterly exhausted. And at the same time, my uncle passed late 2022, and we weren't planning on that. We were actually planning a trip to go to Scotland, and for me, for the first time since being a teenager, revisiting some of my own family history. So early 2023 was, I literally mapped out, and this is what I do. Anyone that does a workshop with me knows that I'm often referring to how I hold big vision, long vision. And this, I always draw, that's the month. But in January of 2023 and 24, I had January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September. But certainly 3 months. And I was thinking about what happens in these months that I want to go to. January, February, March, quite quiet, but I was still going to workplace events, conferences, but also the mind, body and spirit events started in May, the London big ones in May, a couple of the festivals. So I contacted festivals and I contacted some of the mind, body and spirit events. And I also decided that I was going to work on starting to record again. But I didn't have my camper van at that stage. So I was getting out in the car, spending a lot of time on the road, staying in places, taking my camera with this whole focus of how much of that time. So I always draw one of these, which is a very scruffy Monday to Sunday calendar where I plot time out. But I'm a very visual person, and so this helps me visualize where the gaps are in time that I can fill with other things besides the way that I earn some money, create an income. So my whole focus was constantly, my kids have grown up. I love getting on the road. I love exploring. But 2025 was also a way of looking at, okay, how did 23 unfold? How did 24 unfold? What was difficult? What was challenging? What was I clearing out of my own personal life and growing from? And where was I still stuck? And what did I also need to shift? So I carried on doing the festivals and the wellbeing events in 24 and 25. But earlier this year, I decided to wanted to go further afield. And I've talked about that in my other video that should be uploaded now about what I learned about the camper van journeys. I wanted to explore more of the South Coast. I love it, but I wanted to now explore Wales and Scotland. And I hadn't ever been to South Wales and I hadn't been to Scotland and only parts of it when I was a teenager. So the other aspect of this is how over time I'd realized that it was only 23, 24, and 25 where I actually started to create a vision of what are the things that I want to populate into my calendar that are priority, like the wellbeing events, because I like being in those spaces. The festivals are nice, the music's good, you get wholesome food and you meet lots of people and it's transient, but it's enjoyable. And other festivals I wanted to go to, same sort of ilk, really. So what did I want to populate for the year? That got priority. How was I using my weeks in terms of the work I was doing? I was putting in my podcast and the time that I was doing writing. So how was I utilizing those gaps in time? So even if you're working full time, at the this bit is between sort of 12 and 5, and then you've got every evening. So how do I use those time slots available? But also how for years I'd struggled to populate anything moving forward because of certain ideas I had. And now I was purposely doing, and it worked, and it worked fairly well. But I would reflect on those different experiences because as humans, we make meaning out of our experiences, even though essentially there is no meaning to existence. So we've got to ask ourselves if we're depressed, anxious, or stressed, what needs to change? Anxiety can be the call of the soul to say, take a step forward regardless how small. And depression is just really sometimes repressing all our feelings or being stuck in our thought cycles. And of course, it goes much deeper than that. And I can't generalize for everybody. And that's a separate conversation about when to seek help and why it's important to do that. So, so this year it was about me working on the road and giving much more time and attention to that and what I learned as I reflect on that. Because by October, I'd got to Scotland. I didn't know I was going to be able to get there. But the van broke down completely and I ended up coming back in a car and stopping off at places, getting stuck in a storm and living in a state of anxiety, fear, overwhelm, hope, curiosity, joy, exhilaration, all bundled together in that trip. It was very different from Wales, which was just hot. It was smooth. It just unfolded. Whereas the Scotland trip, because the vans started being problematic, the weather started changing. But that's that different story around my camper van. So at the same time, it's that, so in NLP terms, a lot of people are driven to move away from what they don't like. We're moving away from the toxic workplace, the relationship. But if we don't think about what we want to move towards, and that can be really difficult, we can end up standing in this empty space thinking, okay, what next? And then feeling really stressed at I've not put anything in place. And if you don't give your brain some material to focus on, it will start regurgitating all the reasons why you should stay in situations, even if they're not good for you. And that's just what we're learning more and more of in brain research. So we need to give the brain some direction of travel, something to focus on. And what I sort of pull my understandings about human experience is we've all got different experiences. We all narrate life in a different way. We've got different lenses that we look through. And I've lived across different cultures, different class systems, gendered expectations. I was a woman in the 80s working as a chef in a male-dominated environment. You couldn't get any more gendered expectations than that. I've worked in environments where some environments there are more females, and we had to tap into our alpha male that was about doing and moving and managing. And the therapeutic side, you can tap into more of the receptive aspect of yourself, and different jobs require us to bring out different parts in ourselves. So it's not right or wrong. It's just how we show up in the world, and if we want to keep showing up in that way. So I wanted to move further into showing up in a way that felt right and authentic to me, and what gave me a sense of peace and satisfaction, and where did I get bored, and what did I need to do differently. And so 25 was continuation really of what was working, and the people and the time that I liked having with my granddaughter, that relationship started to evolve, and trying on these different identities, and then going back to conversations I'd had around things when I was doing my master's in 2001, where I was thinking about race, difference, complexity, being a woman in mixed racial relationships and having children from mixed racial relationships, and what that meant in terms of how we identify ourselves. Who are we? Am I a sister, a daughter, an employee, a mother? Their roles, when we move out of the idea of who we are and we look at our identity, and we get under that even deeper, that can really go into the essence of how do I exist? How do I be? Not even do. How do I be and exist in this current space? So I wasn't confused, but I was trying to manage multiple truths. And that's a real plus in the work that I do, is having these multiple truths. But not having a fixed idea about the world, how it should look and how it should be, can also have its disadvantage. So you've got to really start to understand yourself well, because you can easily be pulled into someone else's fixed version of the world. And again, that is probably something else to talk about. So it's about acknowledging the psychology of you and what, but not the how, and how our sense of embodiment around these things take longer. And what I mean by that is I could read all the different theories, but it doesn't mean to say that I totally understand what that experience is like. So I can read the theories of certain things about attachment, and I have to tap into my own sense of my own attachment and the nature of attachment with my mom and with my dad, to help me figure out what attachment meant for me. So embodying that means you generate an understanding of that experience, but you've got the language in which to express what that means to you. And that you don't get fixed on you're only an anxious attachment or avoidant attachment or a healthy attachment. We can actually move around these different identities as we move through different experiences. So the psychology of everything I started to learn just gave me the language really to describe those things. But the more and more I knew, the more uncertain it sort of all becomes, because every time I find a new theory that I can relate to and think, oh yeah, that's me. It's me, it's a part of me, but it's not fundamentally the total of who you are. There is a you that likes cooking, that likes walking, that likes fixing cars, that likes football, that likes movies, that likes old style clothes. And we see more of this express itself on Instagram, where people are really tapping into the thing that they get fixated about, and lots of people are enjoying. People who've collected records for the last 30 years or have been artists. I was watching one this morning where they've just, all these people who live in these loft spaces in Manhattan and have just spent years painting and drawing. And that has been how they express what they're fixated about. And they may talk about that process or about the end product, because there is a process that happens. if you're a musician or if you're an artist or a writer, that before it becomes a thing, there is something, and there is something going on in all of us of there is an idea that is there that we're not maybe given any attention to about a children's book we want to write or our own autobiographical piece. So we want to connect with photography because we like landscapes. We're into trees and we've never uh, dived into any of these things in more depth. And this is why it's really important to stop spending so much time in things that don't bring you any joy. In fact, could just derail what's working well and what's building up. So one of the key things is thinking about time wasting activities that you're still involved with. So wasn't about personality as much. It was also about capacity. What capacity did I have to give to these various things in my life? And what did I need to give less time to and more time to? So consciously choosing a structure, because structure helps, some planning helps with some flexibility around how it unfolds and connecting with the things that you enjoy, and not necessarily even as a reinvention, but a containment of that and a trust that as you start to give way to some of those things that don't need your energy and focus anymore, that it's okay to live in no man's land for a few weeks or a few months, because some things can come to try and fill that space straight away. And other times we've just got to trust the universe and know that actually it's nice to enjoy a lull, a pause, a rest, where it looks like nothing is happening. And that can be the germination phase. You have an idea, you've sown a seed, and you're watering that, like you having nutrition, eating decent food, and you're watering and that seed, and that's germinating. But you can't see any evidence of that. And so you've got to be able to stay in your lane and keep focusing on the things that you love, regardless of when that turns into fruition. So you can use the seasons as an example. We've sown all the seeds and we'll sow more seeds in spring, and we'll start to see them bear fruits over the course of the months of how that fruit is bared, and where you place your focus and attention indicates what's likely to get some life force directed towards it. So we need to think a lot more mindfully about where we place our focus and attention, and how our mindset can interfere, either support that or destroy that. So the thing I definitely learned about travel was this sense of aliveness that I started to feel again. I'd had burnout a couple of times, and just like chronic fatigue, where you've got no energy to do anything other than what feels like dragging yourself to the shops or going to pick up the kids from school and doing the basics, to this sense of aliveness and wonder, especially when you go to some of the coastline that's really rough and rugged, and the sea's crashing in and you can feel that sea spray and it hits your skin, and you just feel this sense of your whole system is waking up and enjoying that moment. And so I had more and more of those. And so the more we go towards the things that we enjoy, whether it's a new class or a current thing that we're doing, I know some people who like knitting and are redecorating their spaces or baking more. The more we're engaged in the energy of that thing that brings us that joy. So for me, the travel is more normalized, that I was doing every month. I'd have some time at home, get back on the road again. And it's also about how that focus, because your focus is captivated by the road, you're focusing on the road. And then the new place that you get to, like when I got to Tenby or Saundersfoot, and I'm driving around and it's like, oh, wow, that's so pretty and that's gorgeous, and it's so hot today and it's so lovely. And you feel all those feelings, you're immersed in that. You're immersed in that. So your sense of meaninglessness and depression and anxiety can just dissipate for a while, even if it comes back at some stage. You have some respite from that. And then as I get my camera out and start walking around, there's a sense of mindfulness I get when I take pictures. And I don't know if all photographers feel like this, but you're literally looking through that one space, holding the camera and focused attention It's like when I'm practicing yoga, we do breath of fire and you'll focus on one spot, or you stare at a candle when you're doing meditation and you watch the flame flicker just like that. And you just keep your attention on it. Same when I'm holding the camera and I start looking at the place and and I actually see in peripheral vision. So I see the what's around the shape. And so I place the shape first and then and it's a really interesting experience that I get when I'm doing that. Um, and even when I'm talking about it, I can feel my whole energy is just starting to get really soft and really centered as I look out, because I've done that so many times now. I can really connect quite easily with the imagery as though I'm there. So I can be stood on the top of the car park at Tenby and see the whole vista of the sea and the waves crashing in and the kids giggling and babies playing and the sun beating down on the side of my face and feeling this mixture of the waves in the air coming through and the heat of the sun, and I'm holding the camera as I want to capture different elements. And often for me, it'd be something that just captures me in that moment and I take a picture. There's no, oh, I want to take pictures of people or trees or flowers. So that was about really connecting and setting the intention more purposely to be mindful while driving, while stopping off somewhere, while getting out the camera, and then noticing the things that caught my attention that lit me up, like the seas, the waves, the sounds. And even sitting on the beach meditating, there could be lots of noise around you, but then really allowing your body to settle into that space. So, movement can heal, movement can be mindfulness in action, but it can also exhaust, too much driving, too much of being switched on, and navigating roads where you've got to be mindful of all the other traffic and what's going on around you, what can happen. At some point, you need to sit and rest and enjoy. So at night time, I was actually quite exhausted by about 8 o'clock. Often was falling asleep really early in the van, and at the end of the summer, you didn't notice it as much because the sun started to go down. So all these things are waking up our cells all the time and flooding them with the chemicals that we're experiencing. Dopamine, endorphins, feel-good chemicals, soothing chemicals. But there's a balance of we can't push too much on that. We've got to know when to put the brake on, pull up the handbrake and stop and stay centered for a few days. So I learned a few practical things like I don't think I want to live in the van. My own rhythm, what I enjoy, the very simple things like sitting in Whitby at the table outside a cafe, listening to this guy play the piano for hours. He was amazing. It was just that was bliss, depth over speed. So I'd stop off at places, just spend a lot of time going to the pub or the cafe, chat to people. Had some amazing chats in Whitby around topics that never used to be as easily accessible with the general population, spirituality, some of the philosophy and stuff like that. And I had some really deep conversations, so that was a nice surprise. So you can have an ordinary life, as many people that I walk past on the high street may appear like me, ordinary. But when I stop and I chat with them and find out that, like the guy in Ross and Y, he'd worked for the Philharmonic Orchestra and had traveled around the world. He's in his 70s now. So it's these peoples that have lived these many lives before we meet them. And that's what I find fascinating and like to discover more of. And I wish he'd have been okay with filming, but I'm mindful about putting a camera in somebody's face all the time because there's a lot of that now, isn't there? So it's not a glamorous life. I like wearing my boots, my jeans, my trainers, and just going exploring and seeing what unfolds. I live simply. I've kept the same furniture for years. I'm happy with most of what I've got. I don't buy ornaments. I'm not really, once I've got the aesthetics right and the colours that I like, it probably stays like that for a long time. And it has, because this house I've lived in the longest than any of the properties I lived in. And previously, when I was renting, you just ended up renting whatever the property looked like and didn't really invest in it anyway, because you didn't think that you were going to be there that long. Um, so what changed wasn't necessarily my lifestyle, it was my relationship to being alive, to discovering and exploring things and testing things out and running workshops and just seeing the delight and having the amazing conversations that I had with people. So I was doing more of going for coffee, and I got swimming again. I did swimming for a year before the pool closed. That got my body active because I realized if you have lazy days and you sat down too much, that's when it's easy to creep into stagnancy. Just noticing the pleasure, what really just gave me more very simple pleasure. Because the more you focus on this, it might feel quite surreal or alien if you're usually in a state of stress, depression, and anxiety. So that's often what I help people do, is start to move out of that, because you've got to consciously apply some new tools to start experiencing the initial benefits from them before they become experiences that you don't have to consciously practice, if that makes sense. And it doesn't mean to say I'm free of any anxiety, stress, or overwhelm, because my brain just works in peculiar ways at times. Um, but it's about, again, where I choose to focus, which is why I have things written out of, this is what I want to make sure I do this week. And this is, I mean, it's a bit empty generally because I've not populated it with much for a reason. But at the side, I've got events, and these are the projects I'm working on. So the goal is to use the time more for my projects because I'm not on the road. And I was even meant to have someone fix part in the van today, and he brought the wrong part. And so here we go. Another week will go by. And it's now been 2 months. So now, am I practicing patience? No, I'm just having to be patient. Um, so extraordinary experience doesn't require an extraordinary life. It's whatever feels extraordinary to you. My mum used to get a lot of pleasure out of visiting these little country villages and be able to just enjoy that for the whole day and go traveling, and just very simple days, same thing. So, but why this matters as well, and why this is related to my Change, Grow and Transform program, is I release a video a day that's aligned with a topic and journal prompts and mental health tips, because these are all facets of the things that we know from research that supports you, that when you focus on it and connect with it, can move you more in the direction of the way you really want to feel. So even if you don't know what your longer term vision is yet, or you're not confident at creating one, what you do know is you want to move away from things that don't feel good. So sometimes that's where you are. We're moving away from that. So you need to create a little bit of a plan, because we have to take everyday life into account before we can direct it towards even considering what we might populate our months with. And also, I don't want to populate every weekend. So I like weekends where I'm not doing anything, I'm watching Netflix and I'm ironing and I'm getting my life in order. And other weekends when I want to be out and about, or I'm hanging around with my granddaughter, teaching her yoga and gymnastics, and we're flying around everywhere. Then I come back and I need a day to recover, because it's fun with a kid, but they're on the go all the time and agile, and I'm in the space of doing things for a few days, and then I have a few days of rest or not doing that much. So this is about the program Change, Grow and Transform. I'm releasing series 2 for January, and there is a series 1 on there. It's 1 video a day. You do it in private, and as long as you listen to some of the introduction videos, it gives you an idea, but you're committing to yourself for 5 minutes and then writing the journal prompts, and you keep a journal. I don't know if I've got any of mine here. Yeah, that's my new one thing. Yeah. So these are some of the ones I've written in. So I have a journal. That's the Wellbeing Wheel on the top. These are on my Amazon page as well. They're always empty because I don't like lines in paper, apart from my diary. Yes, I've still got. I will show you so that those who are impressed with paper, I've still got a diary that I write my appointments in, because I'm a visual person. I couldn't find many in this shop, so I thought this will do. It's not fancy. And I just divide my days into slots, like this, and then I know what part of structure I need to structure, and then where there is some room for maneuver. So change isn't about necessarily knowing the destination. Knowing that you might go through phases, like you've been busy, 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 and now you're coming to a standstill and you don't know where to go. So how this can just get you to think about these different assets in your life and aspects of you, that it can move you into feeling more comfortable about being still and not having a plan and not getting caught in the anxiety and the overwhelm, and allowing your brain to bring up all these circular thoughts that we can attach to that aren't useful. And that's why working with clients, me working with clients and people coming to see me, is really helpful for them, because we're often unpacking the conditioning that's getting in the way of you moving forward. And moving forward could just be getting off the sofa and signing up to a class, doing Italian. You've always wanted to do that, booking one weekend trip. It doesn't have to be grand. A lot of the time it isn't. A lot of the time it is fairly ordinary. So you don't need to reinvent yourself. Mine's never been about reinvention. Mine's just been constantly moving through the different jobs that I wanted to do, and then the different experiences I wanted to have, to the point that I decided there was no meaning and purpose. The point is to have the experience and see if you wanted to do it again, and if not, why not, and then move on and do something else. And in other senses, stick it out, do it, focus, put in the work and the effort for the things that may also reap some rewards. And what that is and what that means to you will vary. So this is just about gently opening up to the future. We're at the beginning of the year. I can see the whole of the 12 months in front of me, and I can already see, because I've got this model in my head of the timeline. That's January, but I can see the year. I know kind of what events already happen now and what months. Which ones do I want to do again? Which new ones do I want to find? Where do I want to be? Maybe in August and September. When might I go back up to Scotland, or maybe I go abroad? I'm open to that. And so January, this is the goal and this is the focus. February might be similar. And as we move into March, when the weather improves, then I might spend more time outdoors. I don't know yet. I've got a vague idea, and that's okay. It's okay to have a vague idea. It's okay to have no idea. And it's okay to say, I don't want to set goals, because most people, I don't know, 50% drop their goals by the end of January. But you need to be thinking about, going back to well-being, you do need to be thinking about how satisfied you are in different aspects of your life, and where you do need to make some changes. And that might mean just going for that walk 5 minutes every day, going to the coffee shop, taking your journal, putting your headphones on, listening to my course, and then going from there. So I didn't get here. I feel like I sound like Rigsby off Rising Damp now, by knowing where I was going. I got here mostly by knowing where I didn't want to be anymore, and having some flavour, some vague notion, some hints at, oh, that sounds interesting. That sounds like I might want to go and check that out. And like I said on the other video, I wasn't excited and intrigued to go to Wales or Scotland. I mean, I wanted to go, but I wasn't feeling it in my body, and that confused me for a little bit. But when I got on the road, I started to feel how every experience I was having in each space was different. There wasn't one set of experiences. I loved going to the Welsh Museum, the Whitby Museum, the cathedral at St David's, Carlisle Cathedral, York Minster, Whitby Abbey. I was clearly getting attracted to those spaces. Even when I went to the Isle of Bute, I went to the graveyard where some of our family would have been buried. And was diving much deeper into the history this time. So rather than moving forward and keep finding out new stuff, I was starting to go a bit deeper on things that I'd already thought about over 20 years ago. And now I was going a bit deeper into that. So you don't have to know where you're going. You just need to start learning to listen to yourself and going with the hunches or the nudges. And January can be a bit of a defrag because December on the run up to the holidays is often starting at the end of November, isn't it? So it's been that constant focus and moving forward and having to sort this out and that out. And January is quiet. So use that time to allow yourself to rest, to watch some old TV, um, to spend some of that spare time looking at any maybe short course you wanted to do, or read your emails more fully, or start to map out, okay, I want to go to events, where are they happening? Can I drive there? I want to go to campsites. I want to go to the seaside more. Where can I populate that? If you've got to take time off work, start thinking about when you. I used to always take my holidays in April and September. I rarely took them in June, in July and August. It was quieter at work. I could get more done, and and everything was busy and more expensive. Um, so it's thinking about the seasons and how you want to use seasons. So yes, 2025, I reflected on the fact that I've never really had a big goal, and that's okay. And that I draw information from all these different perspectives, which is why it was hard for me to decide what my niche was or who I was going to focus on. And that I'm doing a lot of the things that I'm doing because I just enjoy them. And if I can create a career out of some of that and some of that yields something, then that's great. But I've loved teaching at the festivals and meeting people, and that has felt deeply meaningful for me, more than money could be at times. So it's okay to not know and just go with one insight. If you're going to get anything out of this video, hopefully it's that one thing. So I'm not selling transformation, and even I don't even know how that can look sometimes. I mean, I know that people like Tony Robbins might get regular transformation of a weekend, but I also know a lot about change programs, and that we can do lots of learning and developing, but it's application and the long-term vision that really gets us the longer term results. Because you can get lots of help when you're in crises and you can sort out your mindset to a degree, but this takes practice. I wouldn't necessarily say work, but it's a conscious process of noticing what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and how you're responding and reacting to life, and what aspects of life you're taking on and what you can let go. So use this time to just be okay being ordinary, to being still, to watching what you like, and to start exploring what will give you those moments of joy. And even if you don't know, and if there's anxiety or fear getting in the way, just try and ignore that and just put in the requirements so that you're safe, your van's safe, your car's safe, you're safe, and start looking on Google and choose one place that you can go to when it's warm enough for you to spend that time, and just start to have those experiences, because it's like saying to the universe, okay, I'm now open to being proactive, rather than I'm sat on the sofa and I'm thinking life is meaningless, pointless, and nothing good's ever going to happen. We don't want anyone to stay in that mindset at all for any period of time. So my biggest learning, I guess, in 2025 was how resilient travel, like there's programs on TV and other podcasters that go around the world, navigating airports and towns and spaces and new roads and finding where to park and not knowing where to stay. It's a lot of mental focus. But you feel so good when you've managed it, when you've got somewhere. When I got to Whitby after being down the country roads that were like that and like that, and I'm like that holding the steering wheel at times. But at the same time, listening to, I got a whole load of CDs of music that I hadn't listened to before, because I just thought I'll see what they sound like. So I'm having these variable experiences of stress and anxiety. But as I turned the corner and got into Whitby, and it was like, oh, wow, it's really cute here. It's lovely. And then just immerse myself in that. So regardless of whether you travel, you stay at home, you like knitting, you like cooking, whatever it is, be okay with where you're at. I'm not saying you need to get up and do anything, but if you're not okay, then try one thing that will just turn the dial, move the needle, and let me know. Either send me an email and let me know what you think, or write a comment underneath here. And if you want to know about my Change, Grow and Transform program, look at what's being released at the moment. We will be on day 7 now, but you can start at day 1. And I've got a workbook to go with that so that you can have a print off or fill in or have a reminder of what was covered in the video, because I've got a lot of the information in there that you can have for free if you contact me at any point in January, because I don't know where it'll be after that. And if you want to work with me separately, we can set up. I have a 2-hour deep dives that just goes into a review and make a short plan, and we can always reconnect at another time, but you don't have to sign up to that, or a free session Kickstarter, because threes works well for me, of a meet you, find out what's going on, where you want to go, and what components are in place that are already working. Because you might need a lot of sleep, and you might need rest, you might need to be kind to your own nervous system, or you might need to move and do a class or something much bigger, and dream even bigger. Dream of that big trip that you want to do. The last point before you go to bed at night, it's not the time to play out all the things that went wrong or procrastinate. I want you to use that time as you go into that more relaxed state to visualize seeing yourself driving the car you want to drive, going to the places you want to go to, cooking the things you want to cook, fixing the things that need fixing. Use that space to play with your imagination in a proactive way. Other than that, thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing from any of you. Bye-bye.